In this program, we will discuss about the practice of journalism in zones of conflict and wars. Our case is in Somalia. According to Reporters Without Borders, freedom of information in Somalia suffers from corruption, political violence, and the central government's extreme weakness. But these are not only the issues related to Somali media. We can also say that professionalism is also one among the reasons why journalists in that country are having a hard time. My name is Thierry Francis Mbabane. Somalia is located in the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia is to the west, Djibouti to the northwest, the Gulf of Aden to the north, the Indian Ocean to the east, and Kenya to the southwest. In the beginning of 19th century, Somalia was occupied by British and Italians. In 1969, Somalia established the Somali Democratic Republic, led by Mohamed Ibrahim. This government later collapsed in 1991 as the Somali Civil War broke out. Since then, Somalia was a failed state. Various armed factions are fighting for power influence in the area, including terrorist factions connected to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. According to the World Bank, Somalia experienced deep cycles of internal conflict that fragmented the country, undermined legitimate institutions, and created widespread vulnerability. In 2012, a first permanent central government in the country since the start of the civil war was installed. The 2017 Somali presidential election was held in Somalia on 8 February, electing Mohamed Ibrahim to the post of president of Somalia for a 4-year term. Our guest today is a Somali journalist who is in exile here in Finland.
My name is Mohamed Ibrahim, and I'm a journalist from Somalia. I've been working for the New York Times for the last 10 years in Somalia. I started working for the Times in 2006, a time where it was very hard to see Somali journalists working side by side with foreign journalists, especially from American journalists, whom the Islamists deem as, and whether they deem as spies or some other elements, which were not, at the time, very relevant to the situation. Since 2011 and 2016, I've been the Secretary General of the Union of Somali Journalists, National Union of Somali Journalists, based in Mogadishu, Somalia. And through that 4 years, I've conducted various projects in Somalia in terms of training of journalists and capacity building, development issues at the side of the media, and let it be the media law, which and the union have been heading with worked alongside with the international community and the Somalia Ministry of Information and the Ministry of Communication in the best way to preserve the freedom of expression and the freedom of the media, since Somalia does not have a law that guarantees the freedom of the press, other than the constitutional the provisional federal government, which Article 18 and Article 20, which guarantees the freedom of the press and the freedom of expression. At the same time, the local laws in terms of the courts do not recognize, for example, any freedom of expression at all, because it has been, those laws has been formed under the former dictator, former military government, and they haven't made any changes at all since the Somali Penal Code has been, for example, ratified by the Somali public, and it will need referendum to make some changes. So, and it somehow, in a way, for example, criminalizes the freedom of expression and the freedom of the press. So, in that way, I've been dealing with various issues. Working as a journalist in Somalia actually is quite tough. I've been working with the Union of Islamic Courts during the courts, and I've traveled to the front lines. I've, covered, piracy, terrorism, for example, local, for example, clan militias and clan warlords and business warlords, finally. So through all those stages, and you can understand Somalia's political landscape, which is quite complex given to the countries which are our neighbors, because Somalia is like we say we have one language and we are one ethnic group. We are, for example, one religion, especially Sunni, Islamic religion, which is Sunni. Given all those, and actually, we are more, it's more diverse, and it's more difficult to understand the political landscape in Somalia, given how it's related to the clan, issues. So everything, for example, in terms of regions, everything, is attributed to a regional basis, which is more like clan basis. So throughout the years I've been covering for the New York Times, actually there has been some threats against me. Let it be, phone calls, let it be emails being sent to me, text messages, all making intimidations of, calling me that I'm an atheist, I'm working for the Christianity. The paper I work with, belongs to the Jewish people, and it doesn't serve the interest of the Muslims. That's what they say, actually. And this is somehow they intimidate you. And given how dangerous the level of the dangerous of the Somali journalists were facing in Somalia, there were, for example, in 2011 to 2016, there were more than 35 journalists who were assassinated or killed, either by Shabab assassins or some elements, clan warlords, or some elements within the government, as well as there has been some journalists who were killed in landmine explosions, through assassinations, all these things. And most of the journalists who were killed used to receive death threats, either phone call or text message or an email, telling them that they are not they are not working the best interest of the Islamic religion. That's what they say. So given that, I've never, for example, I've never thought that I could stop my work as a journalist, given the threat is against me. Actually, the last time, for example, in 2011, I've been putting together, along with my friend who's called Jeffrey Gettleman, who's the East Africa Bureau Chief for the New York Times, a story about, for example, the divisions within the Shabab. The Islamists have been going on through stages. One is there were Union of Islamic Courts. Under it, there were Shabab, and then later the Shabab is split into two groups, which is like ISIS, which is affiliated to those fighting in Syria, or Al Qaeda, which is affiliated, and Shabab is affiliated to Al Qaeda, and there is another group which is split from the Shabab, but are affiliated to ISIS, and they are based in northeastern regions of Somalia, especially what we call today in Puntland. So all those, if you see how the politics, which this we have been investigating, how these politics within the Islamists were built in and how they were divided, and what kind or what such kind of division is within the terrorist groups like Al-Shabaab mean to the public, So I've gone, visited Baidoa and Puntland, Garowe, and some Shabab members who are either being in, for example, rehabilitation centers or in detention centers like jails, and getting interviews from them. So, which was, I think, one of the last investigative stories I was doing. Although Somalia is very tough to do an investigative journalism or investigative story because you cannot do it. Since, Somalia, before 1990s, there was a military government which was controlling the country. And after 1990s, there was a chaos. So all the people, the mind is set to the military area. So they think that freedom of expression is some sort of a criminal activity. That's what they think. So in a way, for example, there are business communities, there are, Shabab, there are Kalam warlords, there are militias, independent militias, the government, piracy, all these groups, entities make up Somalia's political landscape. So, and all these things, if you see how, these things are related, it's very tough. So you cannot do a business investigative story. Otherwise, the business entities are, have their own entities that defend their interests. You can't do an investigative journalism against the Shabab. You can't do against the government because at least the government will arrest you if they don't do anything against you. All other elements will, finish you by through assassination.
So I guess this is something that you know in advance, even you start doing any journalism practice. How do you really manage to work in this kind of environment?
Actually, I've had several trainings which is related to the safety of journalists, as well as working in hostile environments. And this has helped me, manage, for instance, my day-to-day activities and survive at least. Because, for instance, when I was in Mogadishu for the last, 4 years, the only time is it's possible that I don't go outside for the whole day, or I go for the next day and spend an hour outside. Either I have an appointment with some kind of politician or I have meeting, then I come back to my home, avoiding, all, public gatherings and all these things. It's very tough to survive, although finally I've been forced to flee from the country. But actually it is somehow tough because you avoid making any investigative story at all to survive.
So, you came to Finland, and here, Finland is one of the best countries for freedom of information, third ranking with the 2017 Reporters Sans Frontières. How do you feel with this switch?
Actually, I still practice my profession, and although I'm still studying or I'm still learning, the Finnish language. At the same time, I write, articles in English. Then it's been translated into Finnish. And so far, I've written, I think, 4 to 5 articles for whole this year, which, at least makes me some sort of motivation where, and I can write freely, more than free, without, for instance, if you are in Mogadishu, or working as a journalist, you have to keep glancing back. Who is behind you? Who is coming after you? So actually, no more glancing back, and just like writing freely, without any fear of intimidation or threats. So actually, I write articles the same way, better than how I was in Somalia, because now I can freely express without any fear of intimidation and threats.
Let's talk a little bit about female journalists in Somalia. What is the situation, if let's assume if you are a female, would be the same? Would be worse? What do you think?
Actually, under the Islamist rule, it was worse. It was very worse, to be a journalist, a female journalist especially, because I remember that in 2007, 8, 9, 10, the female journalists working in the field of the media have reduced because either they fled the country for their safety, either they have been threatened to stop the profession, and they later stopped and just to get married and just put in house in order, or that they have completely stopped for good, because the Shabab or the Islamists at the time have threatened them not to work as a journalist, and that has made making, I think, 90% of the female workers working as journalists to reduce 90%. But after 2011, when the Shabab were driven out of Mogadishu, there has been some sort of hope, some sort of revival, where female journalists are coming back again. So today I can say that at least the female journalists working as journalists in Somalia make at least 30 or 35%, if not 40, for the whole media industry. So they are making a comeback now. Anyway, because under the Islamist rules, they had pressures, they were forced to stop or either to flee the country or to stop the profession. Today, there are so many young female journalists working in the field who are working as journalists with very good motivations, although the security situation is somehow volatile, and sometimes you can get caught in a suicide bombing or being attacked, singled out because something you wrote about, specific articles you write about specific groups. At the same time, the female workers, the female journalists in the field are becoming, are increasingly, and becoming more, and they are making a comeback. And I can say they are reviving. Yeah.
In which field you see the Somalia media today needs support?
Actually, the Somali media need support in terms of development issues, like more trainings, because there is no, if not one or two, there is no journalistic universities in Somalia. And all the journalists who are working are being driven by motivation, by hobby, by that or that they didn't have, they are committed to serve, their country through the media. So in this regard, the Somali media need to be intensified in terms of the development issues, like trainings of the field of ethics, field of freedom of expression. Not only the journalists, but also the government officials themselves need to be trained in the field of freedom of expression and how they treat as a journalist, because some of the government officials see the journalists as a threat. So this has to be eliminated, and it can only be eliminated through training to the government officials themselves in the field of freedom of expression. And that the journalists need to be, for example, given trainings related to the ethics, which is very important, and also because the only thing that the journalist has to give respect is to the ethical guidelines, which can make some restrictions in terms of journalistic work he's doing. And to that regard, I think that Somali media needs just like trainings, and also some material support in terms of, for example, they have very, for example, some of the government media now, for instance, the SNTV, which Vikis, Finnish Media for Media and Development, has been supporting. There has been a big studio, and although there is a hope that it will be transformed into a public broadcasting service, And there are some, Finnish people, Finnish journalists and Finnish journalists who are going to Somalia and giving training to Somali journalists, which is like a sign of, goodwill. How they, and you can understand that a foreigner who is going to a hostile environment, putting his life at risk, and at the same time providing or supporting Somali journalists. This is really a big support for the Somali journalists. And also, it is also something that is motivating the journalists who are back there, because they see that some foreign journalists are coming home and giving trainings to them. So that is actually a very good start, and I hope that they will continue supporting the Somali journalists and the Somali media at large.
You've been heading the National Union of Somalia Journalists. I think in that area, when you're talking about unions, especially journalist union, there's still a lot of work to do. So if you look at them, which are the major among them? Which are the priorities? Which are the urgent field or domain or area to be tackled?
Actually, in Somalia, there has been the Somalia didn't have any effective government for the last 24 years or 22 years. And now, for instance, the media workers, there is no specific, for example, workers, for example, law which protects the rights of the workers in terms of not only the media but also in general. There is no any rule, the law that protects the rights of the workers. There is no time limit for the working hours. There is no, for example, an policy in which workers can go through. There is no, for example, minimum wage. For example, all these issues need to be tackled, and I think that. There are some organizations like and Vikis has been helping, and the Somali federal government and the Somali journalists in terms of not only in the development sector but also in the reviewing of the Somali media law. But also it's important to look at in general the rights of the workers in terms of how many hours are allowed to work. And how much does the person work in an hour? Because now the journalists work in a very small amount of money, which is like between $200 to $500 per month, which is very low. And this is due to the lack of laws that is defending the rights of the workers in Somalia.
So what do you think has to be changed right now?
I think immediate review for the Somali media law is important, and also the Communication Act, which is quite important for governing, for example, the broadcast services. When we look at the laws, there is also an urgent need, for example, in terms of the training is to the Somali journalists. The Somali journalists are across Somalia. They are in various regions. They have been in other fields. They have studied, for example, other fields other than journalism. So they need is upgrading their skills. For instance, they need is ethical reporting and programs. They need, for example, accurate how to write and accurate reporting, how to do an accurate reporting, balanced reporting, all these things. So I think that those are, I think, immediate needs are like to immediate to tackle in terms of the Communication Act and the media law, which are quite important because there are no laws other than the federal constitution which are guaranteeing the freedom of the press in the country.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome.